Okay, so here we are on notes 19.1c. We have three graphs here. There's just a little bit different than the graphing that we've been doing. First thing that's different is we're going to graph 3 full cycles for each function. It says 2 positive and 1 negative, so that means on my graph you notice my y-axis isn't completely to the left anymore. That means I'm going to graph 1 cycle or 1 period here and 2 on the positive side, just to kind of see how the progression goes. Now, my amplitude is negative, but over here I have to record my amplitude as positive because the amplitude is always positive. But that means that when I'm doing sine, which is middle, top, middle, bottom, middle, because it's negative, the top has to become a bottom and the bottom has to become a top. Okay, we're doing this one in degrees, so to find the period I take 360 and I divide it by b, which is 2, giving me 180. So the period is 180 degrees. My domain is always all real numbers for these guys, and the range, since my amplitude is 4, we're going to be going back and forth between -4 and 4. So I would write -4 is less than or equal to y is less than or equal to +4. Now, my x-axis, I got to figure out how I'm going to count this because there's a lot more lines than there were yesterday or the past few days. So if I look back at some other notes, here's an example that we did the other day. This graph right here, there were always 1, 2, 3, 4 lines. It was the 4th line out that we labeled our period at. So I'm going to label my period at the 4th line out. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to label it down here just so it doesn't get so messy up in here. Okay, so that's 180. Half of 180 would be the middle line. That would be 90 degrees. Half of 90 is 45. And halfway between 90 and 180 is, if I want to find that out, 90 plus 180, divide by 2, find the average of the two numbers, 135 degrees. Now this side's easy to label because I'm just going to make those negative and flip them. So this is 45, this would be -45 degrees. That one's 90, this would be -90. That one's 135, this would be -135 degrees. That one's 180, this would be -180. And then, let's see, going past there, the second period, if this ends at 180, the second one would end at 360. So now I got to figure out some more half-C's here. Halfway from 180 to 360, I'm going to find the average. 180 plus 360 divided by 2 gives me 270. That's my halfway point. Halfway between 180 and 270, take 180 plus 270 divided by 2, and I get 225. And then halfway between 270 and 360, add them together, divide by 2, I get 315. So there's all my markings. My goodness, that's kind of a mess. Okay, so I know that my amplitude is 4, so I'm going to go up to +4 and down to -4, and I know that this one starts middle, whoops, not bottom, middle, bottom, middle, top, middle. So the first cycle goes like this. Okay, and again, I need to continue this cycle. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to duplicate this period or this cycle once more on this side and once on this side. So here, this middle, the end of the previous one is going to be the beginning of this one. So middle, bottom, middle, top, middle. One more time. So there's that end. And this one, since it's coming from the bottom, I have to go backwards. Here's the middle here. I need to go top, middle, bottom, middle. And I'm graphing it. I'm doing that backwards because I'm working to the left as opposed to the right. So let's see. Our graph ends up looking something like that. Okay, so that's just 3 periods of that one. All right, now things get a little bit different. So this one right here, the reason why this one is different is because our b value is a little different. So let's talk about this for a minute. First of all, there's no number in front of cosine, which means that my amplitude is 1. Cosine is my Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. However, because it's negative, this is going to become a b. That's going to become a t. And that's going to become a b. So I'm going to start at the bottom instead of the top. So if I was doing these, here's where the period gets tricky. In radians, I take 2 pi and I divide it by b. Well, what is b? B is pi. So if I divide by pi, the period is 2. Now that seems kind of strange because it's not degrees, it is still radians, there's just no pi with it. So we got to keep that in mind as we're numbering things. That'll actually make numbering a little bit easier. So the period is 2. So I'm going to graph just like I did over here. She's got -2 labeled for me. I'm going to label +2. It has to be the 4th line out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Which means that a second period would take me out to 4. So what's half of 2? 1. What's half of 1? 1/2, or 0.5. What's halfway between 1 and 2? 1.5, or 3/2. We like improper fractions. So there's my first period right there. I am going to reverse those for my negative quadrant. So that would be -1/2, -1, and -3/2 over there. On this side again, halfway between 2 and 4 is 3, as I write 4. 3, and let's see, halfway between 2 and 3, 2 plus 3 divided by 2, just like I did before, but we want fractions, not decimals, and we want improper fractions, so that would be 5/2. And then halfway between 3 and 4, 3 plus 4 divided by 2, change it to a fraction, change it to an improper fraction, 7/2 right there. So those are my markings. Now I got to mark up my y-axis. Now I'm going to actually put 1 up here and -1 down here, just so that I'm not squishing everything right in where my writing is, so I have a little bit more movement to it. So the first one I'm going to do is from the origin, so that's at the bottom, starting at the bottom, middle, top, middle, bottom, and that's the first period of the 3 that I'm going to do. So if I can follow that pattern, it's going to go middle, top, middle, bottom over here as it follows the curve. And over here, back to the middle, top, middle, bottom. So that's what the 3 full periods look like of the cosine graph. All right, the last problem we're going to do is write an equation. The horizontal axis is measured in radians even though you don't see a pi. So that's going to be interesting because that's just like the one that I had above here. So first thing I want to notice, if this is the midline going right through the right on the x-axis, it looks like at any point, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, it looks like it's going up about 1.5 and going down about 1.5. So I'm going to say that my amplitude is 1.5. 1.5. If we want to stick with fractions, we actually prefer fractions, so let's go ahead and change that. That would be 3/2 as a fraction. Excuse me, so I'm going to say my amplitude is 3/2. Now, on the y-axis, we are starting at the top. Then they go middle, bottom, middle, top, and they end right here. So this right here is the width of one period. And it looks like it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so it looks like the period is 4. So if the period is 4, and we're starting at the top, that we have a cosine graph, and that's going to be a positive amplitude or a positive equation because it's the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It's not reversed. So we have 3/2 cosine something. So let's see, I need to figure out my domain is all real numbers. Range goes from -3/2 to +3/2. And the period, again, this is in radians, so I take 2 pi and I divide it by 4. No, sorry, my bad. 2 pi divided by b gives me the period, which is 4. So I'm going to multiply by b to get rid of that fraction. 2 pi equals 4b. I'm going to divide by 4. And it looks like b is equal to 2 pi over 4 would reduce to pi over 2. So what is that going to look like in the equation? Well, pi over 2, if I multiply a theta, it's going to be right there on the top. So it's going to be pi theta over 2. And that's what my final equation is going to look like. So kind of funky there. Real quick, I just noticed on the previous problem, I forgot to write my range. Shame on me. So my range goes from -1 to 1, and now we have our range all cut up there. All right, good luck. Your homework is 19.1c. Now, quick word about your homework. If you use the actual textbook, you are opening a book and setting it on your desk. There is an issue with problem number 8. On problem number 8, they have the x-axis labeled, and half of the x-axis is written in thirds, something over 3, something over 3, something over 3, and then all of a sudden they change to seconds. They kind of screwed up there. They should all be thirds. So that's on problem number 8 in the written version of the textbook. If you use the online version, there is not an issue with that problem. So if you use the online textbook, the PDF version that I'll be putting in the locker, you don't have to worry about that issue. It's corrected there. So this is only if you're using the actual textbook and you have the book open to the appropriate page. Okay? All right. Happy studying.